What is going on, guys? We are back, and today we are going to be doing a showcase on the mod Ice and Fire. Now, Ice and Fire adds in multiple types of dragons, along with a ton of other amazing creatures and items to bring new types of adventure and battles to your Minecraft world. So whether you want to fly around on a dragon wreaking havoc, chase a cute fairy through the woods, or do just about anything in between, this mod will definitely have something for you. To get started, you'll want to make the Bestiary, which will contain all the information you could possibly need to know about Ice and Fire, including general mob details, locations where you can find them, loot tables, and more. It's crafted using 3 manuscript in whatever shape you want, and manuscripts can be found in chests inside dungeons, which include both vanilla dungeons and mini-boss dungeons that will spawn throughout the world that we'll be discussing later. The Bestiary lectern can then be used to discover additional chapters in the Bestiary past the introduction by expending 3 manuscripts per chapter, unlocking up to a total of 27. To start out, we can go over the new types of world generation that are added into the game with Ice and Fire. The first one is going to be there are 4 new types of ore that are added into the game, which are silver, copper, sapphire, and amethyst. Silver is used to make silver armor and weapons, which deal extra damage to undead mobs. Sapphire is used to make an ice dragon summoning crystal, and amethyst is used to make a lightning dragon summoning crystal. Along with this, there are many mini-boss dungeons that spawn both above and below ground that you'll probably stumble across at some point when you're playing through the game, and these will contain both treasure chests and the mini-bosses that correspond to them, but don't worry, we'll be going over those later and how you can deal with them so you can get all the loot for yourself. And now we can get to the real meat and potatoes of what Ice and Fire adds into the game, which are all the mobs that it brings with it, some of which you can befriend and have some fun with, others you may choose to kill and take all their loot. Now there are 4 different types of mobs that are added in, and those are passive, neutral, hostile, and mini bosses. To start out, we can go over the passive mobs, one of which is the Pixie, which is a multicolored fairy that flutters around near tiny woodland villages. They can be found near pixie villages, which are found specifically in dark forest biomes. Pixies can also be captured in jars and will naturally produce pixie dust every 3 days. Pixies are peaceful, but will run up to players and steal a random item if the player does not have their crosshairs on them at that time. Those items can still be retrieved though by simply attacking the pixie and they'll drop it. Pixies can also be befriended by simply dropping cake near them, and then they'll fly around the player, giving them buffs depending on the pixie's color. The Hippocampus is the second passive mob, which is a majestic aquatic beast that can be tamed and ridden. They can be found swimming in both ocean and deep ocean biomes. They can be tamed by feeding them kelp or sponges, which can also be used to lure the Hippocampus over to you to make it a little bit easier to deal with them. Tamed Hippocampus can be saddled, carry chests, and even have armor equipped to them to make them a little bit tougher than they normally would be. When riding a Hippocampus, the rider also gets to breathe underwater. And 2 Hippocampus can be bred by feeding them prismarine crystals. Now we can move on to the neutral mobs, the first of which is the Hippogryph, which is a mysterious alpine flying carnivore that can also be tamed and ridden. They can be found specifically in mountain and sand biomes, and are generally neutral, but will attack a player when provoked or hungry. They can be tamed by feeding them rabbit's feet thrown right in front of them, and once they are tamed, they will sit down. Tamed Hippogryph can be saddled, carry chests, and even have armor equipped to them. 2 Hippogryph can be bred by feeding them rabbit stew, and they will produce a Hippogryph egg, which will eventually hatch. The second neutral mob is the Amphithere, which is a mystical, feathered serpent that soars through the jungle. They can be found specifically in jungle biomes, and are neutral but will attack a player when provoked or fight off any mob that attempts to kill a villager in a village they have come across. They can be tamed by mounting them and surviving their pretty vicious biting attack for a decent length of time. And 2 Amphitheres can be bred simply by feeding both of them cookies. Now we can move on to the hostile mobs, which admittedly there are a fair bit of, and the first one is going to be the Siren, which is a dangerous coastal seductress that sits on seaside rocky islands and sings enchanting songs. They can be found on Siren Islands, which spawn randomly in ocean biomes. Sirens initially appear in mermaid form singing songs. If a player gets within sight radius while they are singing, their screen will turn pink and they will be lured into the siren. Once 3 blocks away, the siren will turn into a naga form and viciously attack the player. Players can pretty easily avoid the siren's song simply by crafting and wearing a pair of earplugs. The next hostile mob is the Death Worm, which is an audacious desert-dwelling worm that burrows in the sand and eats pretty much anything it comes across. These can be found specifically burrowing in desert biomes, and they will attack anything that comes nearby, including players and even dragons. Death worms typically attack by lunging out of the sand and can even launch sand over a wide area when they do so. Wild death worms cannot be tamed. Only by throwing a death worm egg can a tamed one be spawned. While a tamed death worm can't be given commands, it won't attack the owner. And death worms can be mounted by holding 2 fishing rods, one in the offhand and one in the main hand, and this applies for both tamed and untamed death worms. Next is the Cockatrice, which is a vile chicken-like beast that skulks in savannas and will sap the life out of those that look at it. They can be found lurking in savanna biomes, and if a Cockatrice is looking directly at a player, it will fire a beam from its eye that inflicts slowness, nausea, and wither on the player until they look away. If the player attempts to look away, the Cockatrice will run directly in front of them and continue to attack. Wearing a blindfold can protect the player against the stare, but the Cockatrice will still run up and directly attack the player. They can be tamed by staring directly into their eyes for a decent length of time, but be warned that it is very difficult to do so, so you better be equipped well, otherwise you're probably going to die. Next are Stymphalian birds, which are bloodthirsty, carnivorous birds that fly above swampy environments. They can be found in swamp biomes in groups of 3 to 20, and they are able to see players from 64 blocks away and will fire an aerial volley of feathers before landing and attacking the player if they manage to make it past their initial attack. Thankfully, once a player kills one, the rest of the flock will flee in fear. Next are the trolls, which are grotesque brutes that hide in caves and belabor any explorer looking to mine some ore. They can be found deep underground in mountain, forest, and snowy tundra biomes, mainly in caves but even occasionally surrounding dragons in their underground dungeons. To attack, a troll will rush at the player on sight, destroying any unavoidable object in their path. Trolls are unaffected by arrows due to their thick hide, but will turn to stone when exposed to sunlight. Next are the Myrmex, which are cantankerous arthropods that dwell in underground hives and maintain a very elaborate castle system. They can be found in Myrmex hives, which are vast underground nests that are found in both desert and jungle biomes. There are 5 different types of Myrmex, being workers, soldiers, sentinels, royals, and queens. Reputation can be both gained and lost with Myrmex, allowing the player to trade with them like villagers and eventually control the hive using the Myrmex staff. Dropping resin will gain reputation, and attacking any Myrmex will lose reputation for a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 100. If a Myrmex queen is hatched from an egg, she will bond with the player and permanently give them a reputation of 100 with whatever hive she forms. Sea serpents are ferocious reptilian marine predators that terrorize vast oceans. They can be found specifically in ocean and deep ocean biomes, but are pretty rare to come across. Sea serpents will bite the player if they're nearby or fire a jet of boiling water at them from range. If the player is in a boat, swimming on the surface, or near the shore, the sea serpent will leap out of the water and do a ferocious attack. And finally, we have ghosts, which are wrathful spirits that haunt their burial places at night and relentlessly harass interlopers. They can be found in graveyards, which spawn in all biomes, or even when a player is killed by another player. Ghosts can spot a target from 64 blocks away and will circle their target before charging them and screaming, causing a hallucination of a ghost to fly across the screen of any nearby player. Ghosts can also pass through walls, and only silver weapons and the phantasmal blade can hurt them. Now we are on to the mini-bosses, the main one of which is the dragon. And there are 3 types of dragons to go over, which are the fire, ice, and lightning dragons. While there are 3 base types of dragons, each base type comes in 4 different colors. Fire dragons can spawn in any biome that has a temperature above -0.5 other than jungles, savannas, and badlands. Ice dragons can spawn in biomes that have a temp below -0.5, and lightning dragons can spawn in jungles, savannas, and badlands. There are 5 different stages to the growth of a dragon. Stage 1 through 3 can be found in roosts on the surface, whereas stage 4 and 5 can be found in caverns below the ground. Instead of evaporating and leaving loot when killed, the dragon will leave behind a corpse on the ground that can be right-clicked with an empty hand repeatedly to gather all the loot. Getting all available dragon's blood will prevent you from getting scales, flesh, a heart, or even eggs from it. Dragons can spot a player from 64 blocks away and have 9 different attacks, including roars, bites, tail whips, and even elemental specific attacks. They can also break through any unavoidable object to get to their target, making it relatively difficult to escape once the fight begins. A wild dragon cannot be tamed and only comes from an egg hatching. To start the process, fire eggs must be placed in a fire, ice eggs must be placed in water, and lightning eggs must be placed in rain. 2 opposite gender stage 4 or higher dragons can be bred using the corresponding lily mixture for their element on both, after which the female will make a nest and lay her eggs there. A dragon's inventory can be accessed by sneaking and interacting with them to equip armor, and they can be ridden by interacting with them at stage 3 or later. Next we have the Hydra, which can be found in the Hydra's lair, which spawns specifically in swamp biomes. The Hydra will spew venom at the player, inflicting poison and rapidly strike at them when nearby. If the Hydra takes enough damage, its head will be destroyed and 2 will come back in its place, up to a maximum of 9. Each additional head will give the Hydra an attack speed bonus. While the Hydra is lit on fire, its heads can't grow back, allowing it to eventually die with 1 single head left. Next we have the Gorgon, which can be found in the Gorgon Temple, which spawns randomly in beach biomes. If the Gorgon and player look directly at each other, the player will be turned to stone. A blindfold can be worn to prevent this, but the Gorgon will then attack the player directly and inflict a pretty deadly poison. And finally we have the Cyclops, which can be found in Cyclops caves, which spawn in beach, plains, and savanna biomes. The Cyclops will attack any nearby player, letting out a roar and rushing at them and either stomping on them, kicking them, or even decapitating them, killing them in 1 single move. A player can avoid being detected by wearing sheep's disguise armor and sneaking, or by firing an arrow directly into the Cyclops' eye. If successful, their detection range will be reduced to 4 blocks. Along with all the awesome mobs that are added into the game, there are a ton of new items that come along with them. There are many new armor types that can be made from all the different mob drops that get added into the game, and each comes with a special bonus. This includes things such as water breathing and strength increase when wet, projectile protection, and even protection from dragon's breath attacks. There's also lots of interesting swords that get added in that mimic the dragon's elemental abilities. These do things such as lighting mobs on fire, freezing them, or calling down a bolt of lightning with every swing. The most powerful armor, weapons, and tools that are added in require a dragon forge to make. The forge must be powered by a dragon of that type, breathing directly into it. Once you are well equipped with all this amazing armor and these awesome weapons, you should be very well suited for pretty much any adventure that Ice and Fire can throw at you, but it should be noted that there are still a lot of work in progress portions of this mod, including a ton of new mobs and mob improvements, new mini bosses, and even some new bosses and different dimensions that you'll be able to travel to. So definitely be on the lookout for future updates, but hopefully you guys enjoyed today's mod showcase, and I will talk to you later.